Good evening, everyone, and welcome to our live coverage of the latest mission from Cape Canaveral Space Force Station. I'm Will Robinson Smith. I'll be providing our commentary for the duration of this coverage. We are broadcasting, as we always do, from the Spaceflight Now News Bureau here at NASA's Kennedy Space Center. Our Spaceflight Now editor, Stephen Young, is running the technical operations of the broadcast. Adam Bernstein is fighting some blustery winds out there on the press lawn, preparing to track the rocket this evening and do some still photography as well. Now Michael Caine has the evening off. We'll bring up the fellas' handles for you to follow them on X in just a moment here. We'll also be joined in our live coverage tonight from our friends Chuck Briggs, whose camera view you see here of the Falcon 9 rocket, as well as Pete Karstens with Max Q Productions, who will be joining us just a little bit. At the center of your screen, you're looking at a Falcon 9 rocket at the heart of Space Launch Complex 40, otherwise known as Slick 40. We are less than an hour away from SpaceX's attempt to launch another record-breaking mission in the volume this month. They already broke their most launches per month record with their last flight. That was the European Space Agency's Earth Care payload, lifting off from Vandenberg Space Force Base. That was launch number 13 of the month. If all goes well tonight, they will hit number 14. First time they've had a 14 launch month so far. As you can hear, though, things are quite blustery at the press site and really across the Cape. SpaceX notes that we are within 1 hour from liftoff. However, they say, and I quote, teams are keeping an eye on winds, but otherwise looking good to step into propellant load. So that process will begin in a little more than 20 minutes from now. We'll step through the countdown in just a second, but just an acknowledgement from SpaceX that while they would certainly love to capitalize on this opportunity, be able to launch for a 14th time this month, it is quite windy today, and perhaps a reason why they were waiting a little bit later in their launch window to go ahead with this mission. They were poised to launch at the back half of the 7 o'clock hour. Now they're targeting a T0 liftoff tonight at 10:11 p.m. Eastern, 02:11 UTC for our friends joining from around the world. I'd like to help support our coverage of the space program while you're here. Thanks to the more than 2,000 of you who are joining us at the start of our broadcast. Be sure to hit the like button. It allows the YouTube algorithm to do its thing and allow more folks to find their way to this live stream. You can also share the stream, and if you haven't already, be sure to subscribe to Spaceflight Now and click that bell icon when you do, and make sure all notifications are turned on. That way you'll be notified when we do start these live streams or post new videos to the channel as well, as we did this afternoon. If you haven't already had a chance to watch it, we had a great conversation for this week's News from the Press site, a roundup of the week that was in space news. We were joined today by Mike Wall, the spaceflight and tech editor over at space.com, as well as Caleb Henry, who is the director of research over at Quilty Space. Some of the things we talked about today were the, of course, pending launch of the Starliner spacecraft from over at Pad 41, Cape Canaveral Space Force Station, as well as the upcoming launch of SpaceX's Starship rocket from southern Texas. And since we had the benefit of having Caleb on with us today, we dove a little bit into their analysis of the business of SpaceX's Starlink constellation. So be sure to go ahead and check that out once you're done watching this stream. It was a great conversation. And you can look that up. You click on the playlist tab. You can find it in all the other previous News from the Press site's episode. Just search for News from the Press site. Also want to thank our moderator, Callistia Lee, for joining us this evening. Good to see you, and try to shout out any of the other mods when they happen to pop in. Certainly appreciate the moderators that we have here working with us that help keep things kosher in the live chat. We're also powered by a wonderful channel member community here on YouTube. So thanks to folks like that Martin Guy, Jeff Hansen, Suzanne Hatcher, Rick Smith, that Opal guy, Rick Donner, Margaret Davis, Jimbo Indy, Bonnie Long, and many others. As Maria H. Good to see you all this evening and the rest of our channel member community. Channel membership comes with a number of perks, including discounts at our online shop, shop.spacelightnow.com, access to member-only videos here on YouTube, and the ability to watch all of the launch liftoffs from here at the Cape in 4K. And in the spirit of generosity, our thanks to Callistia Lee and Rick Donner for each gifting 10 Spaceflight Now memberships. Really appreciate the both of you for that. And Psychonaut69 for gifting their own Spaceflight Now membership. Really appreciate that from the three of you. And to our newest 21 channel members, welcome aboard. We're glad to have you with us. Be sure to thank Callistia, Rick, or Psychonaut in the live chat if you haven't already. Last but not least, if you have a comment or question and would like to be a part of the show and your comment or question is appropriate to be read in the show, you can also use the YouTube Super Chat feature. Not only does it help support what we do here at Spaceflight Now, but you do give us some interesting things to muse about as we continue to step through the countdown for this Starlink mission. Tonight's launch Starlink 6-64 set to be SpaceX's 40th Starlink mission of the year. As mentioned, though, weather continues to be a potential watch item. Coming into the launch opportunity tonight, the 45th Weather Squadron forecast 90% favorable conditions for liftoff, but did cite the primary concerns as liftoff winds and the cumulus cloud rule, tracking liftoff winds tonight between 20 and 25 miles per hour. Looking at our own localized data, we noticed a peak wind gust of about 28 miles per hour. That was back around 6 o'clock tonight. The most recent gust we've seen in the last hour or so was about 18 miles per hour, so the winds are starting to calm down. However, as SpaceX noted, they are continuing to watch that. It was also a topic of discussion for the Boeing Starliner launch tomorrow. They are also going to be watching the winds, and the winds really aren't going to die down a whole heck of a lot between today and tomorrow. In a 24-hour backup opportunity for the Starlink 6-64 mission, basically a wash, rinse, repeat situation. If for whatever reason, because of the winds affecting the Atlas V rocket, they're watching that. They're watching it for this mission. And of course, we will be watching for that as well. ULA has June 1st, June 2nd, and if needed, June 5th and June 6th to launch the Starliner mission. And if for whatever reason none of those dates pan out because of weather or some other unforeseen circumstance, then they do have to take a little more time to consider when the next opportunity after the 6th would be, since there are some potential life limit items connected to the Atlas V rocket that they will have to assess the timeline and determine the next possible launch date. But right now, everything else is looking good for that mission tomorrow, and everything except for the winds looking good for this mission tonight. taking a look at some of our most recent wind data. As of 9:05 p.m., there were wind speeds of 12.4 miles per hour with gusts of about 19.9 miles per hour. The wind direction was east-northeast. So we will continue to keep our eyes on the wind data, let you know if that has any impact on the launch tonight, besides just creating the whistling that's going through our microphones right now, which is the little bit of extra ambiance that you're hearing. Taking a look at our live chats for T minus 47 minutes, 31 seconds and counting. Suzanne Hatcher has been a member for 1 month. We really appreciate you sticking around with us, Suzanne, and look forward to many more months to come. Suzanne says, hoping for a launch tonight and tomorrow, and we certainly are as well. And that sort of leads into another channel member, Josh King's $5 super chat and question. Really appreciate that, Josh, first of all. And Josh asks, are you guys heading to Starbase after the Starliner launch, if it launches tomorrow, obviously? That is the plan, that we'll be heading down to southern Texas not too long after the Starliner launch. So fingers crossed that everything goes smoothly with a launch, hopefully on Saturday. If not, hopefully on Sunday. If it slides much beyond that, well, things get just wonderfully complicated. So we will hope for the best and, of course, plan for the annoying. We're now T minus 45 minutes and 45 seconds. Less than 10 minutes away from the point at which SpaceX will make the call on the startup prop load tonight. Before we get to that point, let's go ahead and step through the countdown timeline, let you know what we're expecting for things to happen under a nominal situation. T minus 38 minutes is when teams will make the call on the startup prop load. If they are ready to do so, then they will begin at the T minus 35-minute mark. Starts with the loading of RP1 or rocket grade kerosene on board the tanks on the first and second stages of the Falcon 9 rocket. At the same time, liquid oxygen is loaded on board the tank of the first stage. T minus 16 minutes, second stage LOX load begins. But before that happens, we'll see the so-called big vent from the Strongback. Happens as the feed lines are being chilled prior to second stage LOX load. T minus 7 minutes, the chill down of the 9 Merlin 1D engines gets underway. The process involves flowing a small amount of liquid oxygen through the plumbing and the turbo pumps, and it helps protect the engines from the risk of thermal shock and damage during the startup sequence. About 6 minutes before liftoff, the first stage kerosene tank should be full. Then at T minus 4.5 minutes, the Strongback retract sequence begins. It starts with the clamp arms underneath payload fairings opening up, and then the transporter erector, the Strongback, will recline about 1.5 degrees away from the rocket. It stays in that position until liftoff. At that point, pulls back in a much more rapid fashion to clear the way for the vertical climb of the Falcon 9. About 3 minutes out, LOX load on the Falcon 9 first stage tank is complete. 2 minutes out, LOX load on the second stage wraps up, at which point the vehicle is fully loaded with 1 million pounds of propellant. And we do have word that, probably likely because of the winds here, SpaceX is pivoting to the end of the window. SpaceX is now shifting its countdown to the end of the window. As you see, we've adjusted our countdown clock. The new T0 time is now 10:37 p.m. Eastern, 0237 UTC. SpaceX says that they are doing so, quote, to allow recovery assets to get into final position. The recovery assets, of course, include both the drone ship, a shortfall of gravitas, as well as the recovery vessel that's used to scoop up the payload fairings. Tonight, they are using Doug. Stephen reminded me that the drone ship, a shortfall of gravitas, was only in port about 4 hours in total yesterday, so making a very quick turnaround from dropping off its most recent booster to scooting out to its position in the Atlantic Ocean to support the recovery of this particular booster on deck tonight, the B-1076 in the SpaceX fleet. Finishing up our conversation on the countdown timeline. Final 60 seconds of the count. Control of the countdown is handed over from the ground sequencer to the Falcon 9's onboard flight computers. The propellant tanks are brought up to flight pressure. SpaceX launch director will give their go for liftoff at 45 seconds out. The engine ignition command is issued at T-minus 3 seconds. And if all 9 engines ignite and are healthy, the flight computer will give the command for the hold down clamps to release the Falcon 9 for a T0 liftoff. Now currently set for, again, 10:37 p.m. Eastern, 0237 UTC to, quote, allow recovery assets to get into final position. We are now T minus 1 hour, 2 minutes, 25 seconds and counting. Again, if you're just popping into our live stream here and you're thinking, no, I thought they were further along in this countdown and I was going to be closer to seeing the launch. Well, I suppose you are closer to seeing the launch, but we are back above an hour to the planned liftoff of the Falcon 9 rocket because SpaceX says they needed more time to, quote, allow recovery assets to get into final position. At the same time, as you can see our camera bouncing a bit and hear the whistle of the winds, it is fairly blustery here on Florida's Space Coast tonight. And so SpaceX also keeping a close eye on the winds. It was an item that the 45th Weather Squadron pegged as a potential concern coming into tonight's launch opportunity. Still forecast a 90% favorable condition forecast for tonight's mission, but the winds remain a potential watch item. I want to thank a couple of folks here for your support tonight. Our thanks to Mandy J. Houston for a $5 super chat and for Monkey Tree Rob for a $2 super chat. Really appreciate that for the both of you. Thank you for your support tonight. We're now T minus 1 hour, 25 seconds and counting. See a few folks asking about where the rocket's going to be flying once it leaves the pad. So let's go ahead and take a couple minutes and talk about trajectory, shall we? This Falcon 9 rocket is supporting the Starlink 6-64 mission, which means its 23 Starlink satellites will be heading up to the sixth shell of the Starlink constellation. What that means for us is that once the rocket leaves the pad at Space Launch Complex 40 or Slick 40, it'll be flying in a southeasterly trajectory heading to the east of the Bahamas tonight. Following stage separation, first stage will land on one of SpaceX's 3 drone ships. It's got 2 out here on the east coast. The one on deck tonight, as previously mentioned, is a short follow-up gravitas. The upper stage will continue on with the Starlink satellites following stage separation. Fairing halves will jettison a bit downrange of the map you see on your screen here as well. SpaceX has 2 East Coast-based recovery vessels for the fairing halves work. Tonight, the one they're going to be using is Doug. It and the other recovery vessel, Bob, were named after former NASA astronauts Bob Behnken and Doug Hurley, the pair that flew aboard the Demo 2 mission, which we are just marking the anniversary of this week. That was back on May 30th, 2020. To date, SpaceX has launched more than 50 people into low Earth orbit. The lion's share have been on NASA missions heading up to the International Space Station. There have also been 3 private astronaut missions to the ISS as well, Axiom missions 1, 2, and 3. And then, of course, there was the Inspiration 4 mission back in September 2021, a fundraising opportunity for St. Jude and the opportunity for ordinary folks, non-professional astronauts, to head up into low Earth orbit for a few days. SpaceX is in the process of preparing for another such non-destination mission in the Polaris Dawn flight, which will include a number of unique milestones and opportunities for that 4-member crew, led by the same commander of Inspiration 4, that is businessman Jared Isaacman. They'll be performing the first commercial spacewalk in history. And they'll also be using the Starlink satellites to perform a demonstration of on-orbit internet use. They will also raise the apogee of the Dragon spacecraft to a further point than humans have gone since back in the Apollo days. Bringing it back to the mission tonight with the fairing recovery that you see here on your screen. It's an important part of SpaceX's business model since, as you see there, they save about $6 million per recovery effort. Fairing halves float down to the waters of the Atlantic or Pacific Ocean, depending on where the launch is, under the support of parachutes, and they are brought aboard the recovery vessel, as you see here in this picture on your screen. We're now once again T minus 56 minutes, 43 seconds and counting. Just a hair under 20 minutes away from the point in which the SpaceX launch director will make the call on the start of propellant load. And again, SpaceX is going to the end of the window with this launch today if they are in a position to go ahead with the mission. If for whatever reason things are scuttled tonight, they do have another launch opportunity available tomorrow. It is Saturday, June 1st at 7:08 p.m. Eastern. Is when that window opens, if it's needed. T minus 52 minutes, 10 seconds and counting. I want to thank the more than 4,200 of you that are joining with us live this evening. Hope you've all had a wonderful work week and are looking forward to a fun and restful weekend. If you haven't already, be sure to hit the like button. Allow some more folks to find their way into our live coverage as we continue on. And also want to thank channel member Norman Reitzel for a $5 super chat. We appreciate that, Norman, and good to see you again this evening. And thanks to Christopher Brummett with a $5 Canadian super chat. Thank you, Christopher. And always good to see our friends who are joining us from around the world, including our neighbors to the north. Christopher gives a shout out to Gwen Shotwell, who, of course, for those who don't know, is the president of SpaceX and person who runs the day-to-day operations of the company and is obviously instrumental in SpaceX's achievements over the last several years. Mentioned a little earlier that SpaceX is, of course, pushing to the end of the launch window today to allow their recovery assets to get into their final position, in addition to also watching the winds tonight. Here's a look at the drone ship, a shortfall of Gravitas, as it was coming into Port Canaveral for the first time some years ago. You can tell that was back when it was much more shiny and new. You can see how unblemished that X logo is in the center of the drone ship. Since it was put into use, though, it has gotten quite a bit of use. Tonight's mission will mark the 73rd booster recovery that this drone ship has performed once all is said and done. This will also be SpaceX's 315th booster landing to date. T minus 49 minutes, 16 seconds and counting. In just about 11 minutes or so, it's the point at which the SpaceX launch director will make the call on the start of prop load if they are ready to do so. That process will begin at the T minus 35-minute mark with the loading of RP1 or rocket grade kerosene on board the tanks on the first and second stages of the Falcon 9 rocket. And at the same time, liquid oxygen will start being loaded on board the tanks for the first stage. Now T minus 46 minutes, 38 seconds and counting. I want to thank CL Sports Picks for being a member for 6 months at the mission specialist level. Really appreciate that, CL Sports. Who says, let's go. Load that RP1. I want to see this baby fly. Well, if they're ready to load that RP1, that'll happen in about uh, 11 minutes from now, if they're ready to go ahead with that. So fingers crossed that is in fact the case. 44 minutes, 42 seconds and counting. Taking a look at the current coverage map here for SpaceX and its Starlink internet service. This is where they currently stand as of now. The light blue shaded regions on the globe are where the service is currently available. The darker blue shades are spots where service is coming or a date has been set for start of service. The grayed out spots are where service is not available and there are no current plans for it at this time. Taking a look at what the Starlink V2 minis look like. This is a photo from an earlier flight of them in their launch configuration. There are 23 of these V2 mini satellites on board this particular Falcon 9 flight, 40th Starlink launch of the year. Each of them clocking in about 1,760 pounds or about 800 kilograms. With their solar panels unfurled, they have a wingspan of about 100 feet or 30 meters. They use argon hull thrusters for in-orbit maneuvering, built in Redmond, Washington, which is nearest to Seattle. They'll be deployed at about 200 miles or 320 kilometers in altitude at a 43-degree inclination. While we haven't seen a proper rendering or a photo of a fully deployed with the solar panels extended Starlink satellite or Starlink V2 mini satellite, I should say, from SpaceX. Here's a somewhat grainy but not bad image from HEO Robotics when they captured this from one of their satellites last year. We're now T minus 42 minutes, 20 seconds and counting. Just a little more than 4 minutes away from SpaceX making the call on the start of prop load tonight. We will stand by to see if they are, in fact, ready to move ahead with the mission, if they have their recovery assets in place, and the winds are acceptable for a liftoff of the Falcon 9 rocket. Taking a look at the live chat here, I want to thank Scarlett LaRouge for a very generous $20 super chat. Thank you so much, Scarlett, for supporting us at that level. And if I'm understanding your message correctly, you're checking in from the Bahamas, which is very cool if so. Scarlett says, we have loved seeing all the launches with a southeast trajectory. Says hello. Thank you, Scarlett. Appreciate the message and the support tonight. Also, thanks to Paz Maria H, one of our wonderful channel members, for a $2 super chat, saying congratulations to all the graduates in the class of 2024. And yes, if you're graduating from high school or graduating from college or you're getting your graduate degree or your PhD, heartfelt congratulations to everyone in the class of 2024. And we here at Spaceflight Now wish you well on all of your future endeavors. Best of luck and smooth sailing. And our thanks to Rick Donner for gifting 5 Spaceflight Now memberships. Appreciate that, Rick. Very kind of you. And to our newest channel members, welcome aboard. We're glad to have you with us. And be sure to thank Rick in the live chat if you haven't already. We are now T minus 37 minutes, 12 seconds, and counting. At this point in time, we expect SpaceX to have made a call on the start of propellant mode tonight. That process set to begin in 2 minutes, if they are ready to go. We are T minus 35 minutes and counting. At this point, we are expecting SpaceX to have started fueling the Falcon 9 rocket if they are in a position to do so. So we'll stand by for any updates from SpaceX that fueling has in fact begun. Also want to note that this is not the only mission launching tonight from around the world and not the only mission from a U.S. Rocket company as well. Rocket Lab is preparing to launch the second of 2 of NASA's pre-fire CubeSat satellites. And they note that Electron is, quote, icy with locks as the team makes progress through the launch operations. They're looking for a liftoff from down in New Zealand. Liftoff time is coming up at 3:13 p.m. local time there in New Zealand, 3:13 a.m. UTC. For those of us here on the East Coast, that is 11:13 p.m. A little less than an hour from when the Falcon 9 rocket launches. We'd like to watch that launch. I believe their coverage starts, just about when ours is wrapping up, so you can pop over to their YouTube channel for that. love to be able to cover it here tonight for y'all, but given the early start time that we have coming up for the Starliner mission tomorrow, we're going to go ahead and let you check that out over on the Rocket Lab page tonight. We do have confirmation that SpaceX has begun prop load on the Falcon 9 rocket tonight, so they are committed to at least making a run at launching at 10:37 p.m. Eastern, 02:37 UTC. So that is certainly good news. As much as SpaceX can control things, they're going to go ahead and make a run at it tonight. So now we are T minus 32 minutes, 51 seconds, and counting. Coming up in just a couple of minutes here at the T minus 30-minute mark, SpaceX teams will load cryogenic helium onto the pressure vessels on the first stage. Helium is used to pressurize the main propellant tanks during flight. That same process will begin on the Falcon 9 second stage at about T minus 25 minutes. Taking a look at the live chat, I want to thank the now more than 8,400 of you that are joining with us live. We appreciate you popping in on a Friday night. If you haven't already, we'd love it if you could hit the like button for us. It allows more folks to find this live coverage and lets the YouTube algorithm do its thing. Bring more folks here as we continue on with the final roughly 30 minutes of the count. I want to thank a few more folks for your support as well. Thanks to Stephen Ross for a very generous $20 super chat. Really appreciate that, Stephen, for supporting us at that level. And Stephen says, thank you for, as always, for the work you do. Thank you for supporting us in doing the work we do. Psychonaut69 gifting another Spaceflight Now membership. So welcome aboard to our newest channel member. Be sure to thank Psychonaut in the live chat if you haven't already. $2 super chat from another one of our wonderful channel members, Janine DC, saying hello, Will, Pete, Adam, Chuck, and the mods. Hello to you, Janine. Hope you're having a good Friday night. Doug Johnson with a $10 super chat. Thank you so much, Doug. Doug says, we tune in when we can, but you've helped. I love this message. We tune in when you can, but you've helped get my 4-year-old son into rockets and spaceflight, and it's been really fun sharing that with him. Thank you. Well, it's comments like that that really do make this job worthwhile. If it wasn't already worthwhile for the work itself, knowing that we're having some small part in inspiring a younger generation through our reporting and commentary to learn more about the space adventure is really, really cool. So thank you for sharing that with us, Doug. And hello to your 4-year-old kid. Josh King with a $10 super chat. Thank you so much, Josh. Asking what my favorite launch so far this year has been. Um, probably a three-way tie, honestly, right now between the Delta IV Heavy launch, given that was the only Delta IV Heavy that I've seen in person, and it was the final one ever. The Crew 8 mission was great. Having had an opportunity to sit down with them each one-on-one at the Johnson Space Center, got to know them a little bit better, and so it was really great seeing them launch and seeing the work that they've been doing on station. And of course, the most recent flight of Starship was always super impressive. So that's probably my answer to that one. Is not a singular launch, but probably those three in no particular order. Sort of Jazz asking where are we going to be filming tomorrow? Well, we'll be broadcasting as we are tonight from the press site here at the Kennedy Space Center. So we'll be right here. There's a callback from one of our earlier streams this week. I Can't remember if it was during the Earth Care launch or the last Starlink, but channel member Rick Donner with a $5 super chat. First off, thank you for that, Rick. And Rick saying, "Will, I've been binging X-Men '97 all day trying to pick out your brother. LOL." Well, I will save you the hunting and let you know my brother Isaac is the voice of the X-Men character named Bishop. So without giving any spoilers away, um, he is he's featured within the first two episodes, I think the first three episodes of the series, and he also has some additional voice work in the season finale. So if you have not watched it, I will not spoil who he is, but if you watch the credits and look for Isaac Robinson Smith, you'll see who else he was voicing. Bishop. Well, let me not spoil anything. I'll stop talking now. But yes, thanks for asking, Rick. We're now T minus 27 minutes, 13 seconds and counting. As I mentioned, this will be the 14th flight of this particular booster, flying on the 14th mission for SpaceX in the month of May. While we have some time between now and the big event, let's go ahead and step through the booster history of this particular first stage, tail number 1076 in the SpaceX fleet. Booster first launch was a Dragon flight to the International Space Station back on November 26, 2022. Headed up from Launch Complex 39A, this was the Commercial Resupply Services Mission, or CRS-26, sending up the Cargo Dragon spacecraft to the ISS with more than 7,700 pounds of science and cargo in tow. Second launch came on January 10th of last year. This was the OneWeb Flight 16 mission, the second of three dedicated launches of the OneWeb constellation. Of course, after Russia invaded Ukraine, OneWeb launched the Soyuz rocket as a launch vehicle, then decided to buy three dedicated flights from SpaceX and two from India to send up its remaining constellation. OneWeb has 647 647 or 637, one of the two, but in excess of 600 satellites in low Earth orbit supporting its internet constellation. Those satellites manufactured here on Merritt Island at the Airbus OneWeb satellite facility, right across the street from Blue Origin's factory, where they manufacture and prepare the New Glenn rocket for its missions coming up. First flight later this year. Speaking of flights, third flight of this booster was its first round with Starlink satellites. That was back on February 27th. This was also the very first batch of the V2 Mini version of Starlinks. That was the 6-1 mission. That was followed up on April 7th when this booster supported the launch of satellite called Intelsat 40E. Communication satellite also included a NASA payload called the Tropospheric Emissions Monitoring of Pollution, an acronym shortened down to TEMPO. This is a UV visible spectrometer that monitors air pollutants hourly across North America. And in fact, just yesterday, as a matter of fact, NASA and the Center for Astrophysics at Harvard and Smithsonian shared that the TEMPO instrument and its air quality data is now being shared publicly for the first time. So you can go over to their website and start to see down to a neighborhood scale near real-time information on air pollutants around the United States. So very cool tool that will be used to help monitor pollutants like ozone, sulfur dioxide, and formaldehyde during the daytime. And at nighttime, it can also measure light pollution. So hopefully, the information gathered by Tempo will help inform some city planners and other community leaders on ways to help improve neighborhoods and communities around the world, or excuse me, around the United States at least. Hopefully, more instruments like this can be introduced to improve conditions around the world total. Launches 5 through 8 for this particular booster were all Starlink flights. Those included Starlink 6-3 on May 19th, 6-6 on July 24th, 6-14 on September 9th, 6-21 on October 5th. The ninth launch carried up the O3B Power 5 and 6 satellites manufactured by Boeing. They headed up to medium Earth orbit on behalf of the satellite operating company, SES. The 10th launch of this booster was the Ovzon 3 satellite on behalf of the company called Ovzon. That mission went up on January 3rd of this year. Launch number 11 was another batch of 23 Starlink satellites. That was Starlink 6-40. That lifted off from Pad 40 on February 29th. It was followed up by the launch of Eutelsat 36D for a French satellite operator Eutelsat on March 30th. And most recently, another Starlink mission, Starlink 6-54, that lifted off from Pad 40 here at the Cape back on April 28th. We're now T minus 21 minutes, 48 seconds and counting. Just about a minute and some change away from the start of the big event as they chill the feed lines at the Strongback prior to second stage LOX load. And T minus 20 minutes, 16 seconds and counting. The so-called big vent now in swing here at the press site, or at the pad, indicating that SpaceX is on track with fueling operations for its Falcon 9 rocket. This conditioning will continue till about T minus 16 minutes and 30 seconds when the big vent wraps up, preparing for second stage LOX load to begin at T minus 16 minutes. Here now, T minus 17 minutes, 51 seconds and counting. Just a little more than a minute left on the big vent here. I want to thank the nearly 13,000 of you who are watching with us live tonight. If you haven't already, be sure to hit the like button if you would. Allows more folks to find their way in to our live coverage, allowing the YouTube algorithm to steer this way, noting the engagement. Taking a look at the chat, I want to thank a few more folks for your support tonight. One of our wonderful channel members, Breezy49, the $5 super chat. Thank you, Breezy. Saying thank you for your great coverage and commentary. I really appreciate your support of that tonight. Channel member B Porter has been a channel member for 2 months, the pad leader level. We're certainly appreciative of you sticking with us, B Porter. Curious now where B Porter is watching from, since they say Bruno the Black Bear will be enjoying the watch tonight. 400, I'm assuming 400-pound male just popped onto the cam. Everyone enjoy. Well, hopefully wherever you and Bruno the Bear are not in close proximity. But I guess fun that we have a bear kind of in the audience tonight. We're now T minus 16 minutes, 18 seconds and counting. You see the big vent has wrapped up and second stage LOX load about to commence. Our thanks as well to Mel Roberts Harold with a $5 super chat. Mel says, made it back to Coco, ready to set up the launch here. Well, Mel, you made it back just in time, not only, of course, for the Starlink launch tonight, but for the Starliner launch coming up tomorrow, just afternoon. Everything continues to go well with ULA, Boeing, and NASA. Expedition Greg has been a member for a month. It's always cool to see people hit that 1 month mark. Glad to have you with us, Greg. Greg says, thank you for everything you and your crew do to bring this coverage to us. Yes, I'll pass the kudos along to the fellas because it is certainly a team effort for these live launches, and especially big coverage like we've got coming up tomorrow and for the Starliner, or excuse me, the Starship launch. Too many rockets that start with Star. Uh, Starliner, the spacecraft, Starship coming up no earlier than June 5th. Thanks to Kenneth Piles as well for a $10 super chat. Thank you, Kenneth, who says lifetime launcher, 30 years of service, second generation of Boeing and ELV launch service program from 2002 to 2015. Disabled at 52. Well, thank you for your service, Kenneth, and I'm sure it's been quite the career being a part of the ELV launch service program. We got a note earlier in our coverage of inspiring uh, a youngster to get interested in spaceflight, and we see got some inspiration for some of the older generation. Sergeant Jazz with a $5 super chat saying, "Just applied to SpaceX today. You guys made me do it." Well, good luck in whatever position you applied for, and I hope it makes you happy. And finally, for now, thanks to Adam with a very generous $20 super chat, and channel member Nelson Reyes for gifting 5 Spacefly Now memberships. Thank you, Nelson. To our 5 newest channel members, welcome aboard. We're glad to have you with us. Be sure to thank Nelson in the live chat if you haven't already. A little bit breezy tonight as we've been talking throughout the broadcast, so apologies for the shaking in the cam view you're about to see, but as we are continuing on through the count, want to take some time to talk about the vehicle that's going to be launching tonight. Of course, SpaceX's Falcon 9 rocket, which stands at 70 meters or 229 feet tall, with a diameter of 3.66 meters or 12 feet. Majority of that made up of the Falcon 9 first stage. It's the bottom 2/3 of the rocket, and the booster, of course, that is preparing to fly tonight has flown 13 times before, going in for its 14th, tail number 1076 in the SpaceX fleet. The base of the first stage are 9 Merlin engines, which burn rocket-grade kerosene and liquid oxygen, producing 1.7 million pounds of thrust. Around the engine compartment are black carbon fiber landing legs that will be used to land the first stage on the drone ship, a shortfall of gravitas. Above the first stage is the inner stage. This is a composite structure consisting of an aluminum honeycomb core surrounded by carbon fiber. In the image on the right side of your screen, you can see those deployable hypersonic grid fins. These are titanium winglets that provide stability and steering for the Falcon 9 as it comes back through the atmosphere tail first, like a big old dart towards the drone ship. At the top of the inner stage are 3 mechanical latches that attach to the second stage. At first stage main engine cutoff, high pressure helium is used to release those latches. Automatic pushers ensure a clean separation. Second stage engine nozzle is also housed safely inside the inner stage adapter until stage separation. Speaking of that second stage, the upper stage of the Falcon 9 powered by a single modified Merlin engine called a Merlin vacuum engine or an MVAC engine. It's equipped with a large nozzle which is optimized for burns in the vacuum of space, hence the name. It produces more than 200,000 pounds of thrust and it will be fired twice on today's flight, placing the 23 Starlink satellites into their intended orbit. That MVAC engine burns the same propellant mix, that being RP1 and LOX, same as the first stage. Following satellite deployment, that Merlin vacuum engine will ignite for a third time on a deorbit burn that will drive the upper stage back into the atmosphere, where it will burn up and help to eliminate the risk of creating any unnecessary space debris on this mission. Finally, the payload fairings at the top of the rocket, encapsulating the 23 Starlink satellites. Fairing is made up of a carbon composite material, 13.1 meters or 43 feet tall, 5.2 meters or 17.1 feet in diameter. Two halves of the payload fairings will be recovered a little bit further downrange from where the first stage lands on the drone ship. They gently splash down under parachutes, and the recovery vessel Doug will scoop them out of the water, return them to Port Canaveral, and then subsequently Cape Canaveral Space Force Station for refurbishment and reuse. Of course, SpaceX is in the process of certifying both its payload fairings as well as its first stage boosters for up to 40 flights each. You can look back at the live chat here. I want to thank uh, handle name Joe Biden Falling for a £5 super chat. We'll appreciate the support. Janine with a $2 super chat, wishing safe travels to United Launch Alliance. And of course, supporting the NASA astronauts Butch Wilmore, Sonny Williams, and started the Starliner spacecraft set to launch at 12:25 p.m. Eastern Time. Thanks well to one of our channel members, SG, for a $4 super chat. Really appreciate that, SG. Mr. Jim Edgar joining us with a very generous $50 super chat. Thank you so much, Jim. It's wonderful to see you tonight, and we really appreciate you supporting us at that level. Thank you so much. Jim says, Jim Edgar, Elise Bean, Tim Marie are watching with the cats, Millie, Rex, Kip from Snoqualmie, Washington. And I will always appreciate the phonetic spelling of Snoqualmie, Jim. Maybe someday I'll just remember the pronunciation, but until that day, the phonetic spelling is much appreciated. Kells with a $5 super chat. Thank you so much, Kells. Richard Cochran with a £10 super chat. And a bit of a wordplay here. Locks loading. Why are they filling it with smoked salmon? But bum. Audrey Ackroyd with a $5 super chat. Thank you, Audrey. Rita Loy's been a member for 6 months. We appreciate you sticking with us, Rita, who says, I'm glad to support Spaceflight now. We really appreciate it. We are very much powered by our channel members here. So thank you for your ongoing support of what we do here at Spaceflight now. come back to the live chat in just a moment here. We're at T minus 7 minutes, 38 seconds and counting. Let's talk about the launch timeline now. This is the sequence of events that we're expecting once the rocket leaves the pad. Of course, the liftoff is set for 10:37 p.m. Pacific, or excuse me, Eastern tonight. That's 0237 UTC. T plus 1 minute and 11 seconds, the rocket will begin to pass through max Q, or the point of greatest aerodynamic pressure on the vehicle. It's followed up by a few different events in fairly rapid succession. Starts with first stage main engine cutoff, or MECO, at T plus 2 minutes and 25 seconds, followed 4 seconds later by stage separation. Second stage engine ignition, or SES1, at 2 minutes 36 seconds. And then the payload fairings will be jettisoned at T plus 2 minutes 58 seconds. T plus 6 minutes and 3 seconds, the first stage entry burn begins. That burn lasting 21 seconds in total. Sets up for the first stage landing burn to begin at T plus 7 minutes 49 seconds. And then booster 1076 in the SpaceX fleet set to touch down on the drone ship a short fall of gravitas at T plus 8 minutes and 9 seconds. 30 seconds later, the Merlin vacuum engine will cease firing. SECO 1. The upper stage will go into a parking orbit and coast until T plus 54 minutes and 3 seconds, when there will be a brief 2-second burn, setting up for the Starlink satellites to deploy at T plus 1 hour, 5 minutes, and 12 seconds. We're now T minus 5 minutes and 49 seconds and counting. We are just about a minute away from the start of the Strongback retract sequence. Again, that'll begin with the clamp arms underneath the payload fairings opening up. Then the transporter erector, or the Strongback, will incline about 1.5 degrees away from the rocket. Stay in that position until liftoff. We're now T minus 4 minutes, 50 seconds and counting. Getting some pad views here from SpaceX now.
Strongback lower has started.
We're now T minus 4 minutes and counting. See those clamp arms underneath the payload fairing opening up. You should see the Strongback start to move away from the rocket in just a matter of seconds. Again, it's just a slight lean back. It'll pull back in a much more rapid fashion as we hit liftoff. As we come into the final few minutes of the count, certainly want to thank the more than 27,000 of you who are joining with us live. If you haven't already, be sure to hit that like button. Allow some more folks to find their way in on these last few minutes before liftoff. Now T minus 3 minutes and counting.
Stage 1 LOX load complete.
We're still more than 2 minutes away from liftoff. Coming up on the conclusion of fueling the next few seconds here. I want to thank Anthony Broski and Lithium Battery Company for each gifting a $20 super chat.
Stage
Thank
2,
you to
box load complete.
both of you for supporting us at that level. Lithium Battery says, please say thank you to my wife for letting the baby stay up to watch the rocket launch tonight. Thank you to Lithium Battery's wife. Appreciate y'all hanging out with us for a little bit longer. Just got a minute and a half left to go before liftoff here. See if we can fit in a couple more super chats. Thanks to
Gas launch closeouts has started.
Audrey Ackroyd. You see ground gas closeouts now in swing. B1 for $2 super chat saying, can't wait till we get back to the moon. Sly Fox 720 Studios and Jesse Mason both with $20 super chats. Really appreciate that, Sly and Jesse, for supporting us at that level. Jesse says, love Spaceflight now. Keep up the good work to everyone who works to bring us the coverage.
Falcon 9 is in startup.
Speaking of the coverage, we will come back to the live chat on the other side of booster landing. But for now, let's go ahead and focus here on the rocket. So we're waiting for the launch director to make their call.
LD, go for launch.
And with that, SpaceX is poised to launch its Falcon 9 rocket in 30 seconds. This will be the 40th Falcon 9 launch of the year dedicated to sending up Starlink V2 mini satellites, now 15 seconds away. And here we go in 10, 9, 8, 7, 6, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. Engine ignition and liftoff. Liftoff of the Falcon 9 rocket, the 14th for SpaceX in the merry month of May. Falcon 9 has cleared the tower and is soaring high above Florida's Space Coast. Beautiful vantage point from here at the press site. The Falcon 9 rocket lifts off from Pad 40 at Cape Canaveral Space Force Station, illuminating the clouds above.
Jet pressure small.
Views here from our Adam Bernstein's tracking camera here at the press site as well.
Power and telemetry nominal.
Tracking now from Pete Carson's with Max Q Productions. Coming into a minute of flight.
Falcon 9 is supersonic.
Falcon 9 now traveling faster than the speed of sound, supersonic. Coming up to max Q, the point of greatest aerodynamic pressure on the vehicle now.
Max Q.
Coming up on those events in fairly rapid succession here. First will be first stage main engine cutoff for MECO. T plus 2 minutes and 25 seconds. That'll be followed 4 seconds later by stage separation. And second stage engine start at 2:36. And then fairing deployment just before the 3-minute mark. That call and back chill, they are thermally conditioning the Merlin vacuum engine preparation for its start. Tracking views here from our Adam Bernstein and Pete Carson's, less than 10 seconds now from MECO. And there you see main engine cutoff. Stage separation.
MECO.
Second stage engine start.
Separation confirmed.
Strongback ignition.
All good callouts as we're seeing the onboard cameras now from SpaceX. Those hypersonic grid fins are deploying. Payload fairings
Fairing
been
separation
jettisoned.
confirmed.
Still getting good tracking views from our Adam Bernstein here at the press site. Some cloud coverage making it a little tricky. So view again from Pete Carson's. Now T plus 3 minutes, 43 seconds counting into this mission. Next big milestone coming up will be the start of the entry burn at T plus 6 minutes and 3 seconds. That burn lasting 21 seconds in total. As the Falcon 9 first stage begins to slam on the brakes and slow itself down in preparation for the landing burn. So far, all proceeding nominally with this Starlink 6-64 mission. Continuing to see a good burn of that Merlin vacuum engine, toggling between the camera views on the onboard cameras. The engineers going back and forth, making sure that there's still a good and consistent burn of that engine. Now coming up on the 5th minute into flight.
Vehicles are on a nominal trajectory.
Good call out from SpaceX. We're now less than a minute away from the start of that first stage entry burn. Depending on where the clouds are hitting, we may or may not be able to see it with our ground tracking cameras, but if we can spot it, we'll be sure to bring that to you. Now just seconds away from the start of that entry burn in real time.
Stage
It
1
looks like we've
FTS has safed.
got it.
Stage 1
Well
entry
done
burn
to
startup.
Pete and Adam. That entry burn now coming to a conclusion in real time, continuing on that slight delay from the SpaceX feed.
Stage 1 entry burn shutdown.
And with the conclusion of that entry burn, that
Stage
sets
2
up
FTS has safed.
the start of the landing burn coming up at T plus 7 minutes and 49 seconds. So far, all continuing to move smoothly with this mission.
Vehicles are on nominal trajectory.
Following a nominal trajectory. Still getting views from the upper stage.
Stage 1 transonic.
We're a few seconds away from the start of the landing burn.
Stage 1 landing burn.
Stage 2 and terminal guidance.
Now hearing that audio coming from the drone ship, shortfall of gravitas.
Stage 1 landing leg deploy. Stage 1 landing confirmed.
And for a 14th time using a booster flying on the 14th mission of the month, 1076 safely touched down on the drone ship.
Evac shutdown.
And with that call out for MVAC shutdown, the upper stage going into that parking orbit I mentioned earlier will continue to coast until about T plus 54 minutes and 3 seconds. There will be a brief 2-second burn, setting up for the Starlink satellites to be deployed at T plus 1 hour, 5 minutes, and 12 seconds. And with that, let's go ahead and pop back over to the live chat. And should we thank some more folks before we go ahead and close things out tonight? Our thanks to Tony Marquez for a $5 super chat. Thank you, Tony. Says, thank you for these launches. When is the next California launch scheduled? I believe there's one coming up on looks like there'll be one early next week, potentially on the 4th, although that's still being looking for a little more finality on that. But be sure to check out our schedule over at spaceflightnow.com for the very latest on that. Striker Leggett for very generous $50 super chat. Thank you so much, Striker, for supporting us at that level. That is very kind of you tonight. Striker says, hello again from North Carolina's East Coast. Letting my children watch again. Hello to all the Leggett kids. Hope you had a good time watching the launch tonight. We're glad you could stay up with us. Greg Jazz with a $2 super chat, shouting out his peeps up in Jacksonville, Florida, in the Duval area. Zeus's mommy joining us from the Virginia area with a $5 super chat. Thank you so much for that. William S. with a 10 R super chat saying hello from Brazil, where I'm watching with my daughter. Thank you for the brilliant coverage. Well, hello to you and your daughter there in Brazil. We're very appreciative of you joining us tonight, and thanks for supporting the coverage. Silver Creeks Wildlife has been a member for a month. Appreciate you sticking with us, Silver Creeks. Clearly right before liftoff, saying 1 minute, let's go. Callistia Lee, one of our wonderful moderators and channel members, with a very generous $20 super chat. Thank you for all you do, Callistia. Callistia says, thank you, Will, and all at Spaceflight Now. Amazing coverage as always. We appreciate all you guys do. Well, thank you for helping us do it. Rick Donner with a $10 super chat. Rick asking about the stiffening ring, saying I haven't seen one fall off in like 10 launches. Not too sure about what they've been doing with the stiffening ring. Rick, that's a good question. I wish I had a better answer for you. Great, Jazz. Perhaps they've found a way to eliminate it. Greg Jazz with the $5 super chat. Thank you so much, Greg. Says, got a great view and some crappy phone video from here. Well, the most important thing is you captured it with your memory, right? Norman Reitzel with a $10 super chat, one of our channel members. Guess you missed when we talked about telemetry earlier on in the broadcast. So we'll try to bring telemetry in early and then back before liftoff for those who missed on the front end. I know there's a lot of folks who ask about that, so we'll make a note of that as we move forward. And last but not least, K-Bass with a $2 super chat. Thank you for your support, K-Bass. With that, let's go ahead and tick off the mission stats as they currently stand. This was the 14th flight of Falcon 9 booster 1076, the 342nd Falcon 9 launch to date. This was SpaceX's 57th launch of 2024, the 285th Falcon booster reflight, or the launch of a booster that has flown at least once. This is SpaceX's 58th launch of the year so far, including the third test flight of their Starship rocket, the 116th orbital launch within the last 365 days, the 189th orbital launch from Pad 40, and the 244th orbital launch from this particular pad. Closing out the month of May, this is where the bar chart stands. We are just a few shy now for SpaceX from tying its total number of launches in 2022. And nearly 2/3 of the way through its total launches from last year. Finally, some recovery stats now. Not finally, got two more after this. This was the 73rd landing on the drone ship, a shortfall of Gravitas. This was SpaceX's 246th overall drone ship landing and their 315th booster landing to date. Finally, some industry stats. This was the 41st orbital launch from Florida, the 60th orbital launch from U.S. soil, the 65th orbital launch from U.S. rocket company, and the 109th orbital launch from around the globe, including 3 launch mishaps and a partial launch failure from China, 2 total launch failures in Japan, 1 in North Korea, or 1 in Japan, 1 in North Korea. This is where the pie chart stands as of right now. And apparently the tiredness of my voice is my body's telling me that it is time to wrap this up and get this show on the road. The Strongback is coming up here at the pad. Of course, we're going to be back in action very, very early tomorrow on our end. We've got our live launch coverage of the Boeing Starliner crewed mission to the International Space Station, the crew flight test, launching at 12:25 p.m. tomorrow. Our live coverage is set to begin at 7:40 a.m. tomorrow. That's Eastern time. So be sure to subscribe to Spaceflight now on your way out the door. Turn on all notifications so you get alerted when we start that live coverage. And we hope to see you back here in the AM. Our thanks to our friends Pete Carsons with Max Q Productions, Chuck Briggs as well for helping to provide some additional views and tracking of the Falcon 9 rocket. Our thanks as always to our launch photographers, Adam Bernstein, Michael Kane. Looking forward to seeing their photos of the Starliner launch tomorrow as they come in. Thanks as well to our Spaceflight Now editor, Stephen Young. I see Seabass got a couple more super chats in there right at the buzzer. A $5 one and a $2 one saying you guys are awesome. Thanks, Seabass. We think that you're pretty awesome as well. Speaking of awesome, all of y'all out there are awesome for hanging with us to the very end of our live launch coverage. Again, we'll be back with you for Starliner tomorrow morning. So we're going to pack up, get some Z's, be back out here at the press site bright and early. So for all of us here at Spaceflight Now, remember, be good to yourselves, be good to others, and we will see you tomorrow, folks. Good night.